like that, but
no,
it's
it's
weird.
no
Anyway,
unmirrored. That's the thing. It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
opposite
Anyway,
of
guys,
mirrored.
welcome. I'm Thomas, and welcome to TTT, which can stand for Thomas's Torture Time or Thomas's Tangent Time. Welcome tonight, guys. Really appreciate you joining us. So, coming off of the Alex O'Connor and Dinesh D'Souza debate, we are going to give an overview of what theology is and how that differs from the,
Are we live?
the philosophy of religion.
Yes, we're live.
Yes, we're
Yes.
live, Peter.
Dal's asking for we're live.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, it's all good. We can make mistakes. This is all right.
I'm looking for the link on YouTube. Sorry, so you can share it.
So basically, everybody in the audience, we're going to be covering, the differences between the philosophy of religion and studying direct doctrine from religions, and rather focus on the theology. And the theology is very different. And I'll explain it in a moment in more detail, but it seeks through reasoning and epistemology, find ways to understand the spiritual. I am going to come at this from an agnostic atheist perspective. I know some people say you can't be an agnostic atheist, but I'm just using it for colloquial purposes. So I don't know if I'm going to do a multi-part series on this, but it might have to be. We're going to get through as much of it as we can tonight, and that's why I have such a huge and awesome panel. My friend Dalsu, my friend Don Prager, who has his own channel. Please follow him. My friend Peter, and my friend Casey. And we're all here just chilling, so I'm glad you're chilling with us. So let's jump right into it, because I know everybody has an opinion on this, and let's go around the room. What theoretical orientation are you gonna look at this by? Are you gonna look at it through a religious lens? Are you gonna look at it through an atheistic lens? What do you think? Anybody can go.
No, first.
Yeah, go Peter. Go first.
I suppose. Well, I mean, I'm an atheist, and it took me a long while to get out of the maze, and it was just purely curiosity. I had no internet at the time. I had no friends that were atheists. I had no books to go along. So it was just a gradual, from after being brought up as a Catholic, it's just a gradual questioning and deconstruction of the, what is true and what's not true. And I've come to the conclusion that as far as a theistic God, if that exists, I reject the idea, because it's purely man-made.
Yeah, like a God who cares who you sleep with and stuff like
Well,
that.
everything screams of human emotion and shame and pride and everything else.
Well,
So
we've come a
anyway,
long way.
so that's my position. I'm coming from that, and I'll be looking at it
Yeah.
from a very scientific and a logic and reason point of view.
Yes. So Dal, you must go next. Can you hear me, Dal? Hello?
I don't think Dal can hear you.
I don't think Dal can hear anyone.
Nope.
I
Get lit.
think I can't hear if someone's talking.
You're good.
Yeah,
Go.
we're all talking and waiting for you to speak.
Oh, what? You want me to introduce myself? Is that what you
No,
mean?
no.
The question was okay. So I'll answer, and then you can figure it out. Okay. So
Maybe I didn't hear the question.
okay.
So many technical difficulties. It's okay.
I think you did, but
Oh,
Okay,
I can't hear.
so-
Yeah, Dal, can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay. We were having a problem with that, so you didn't even hear my question.
No. Okay. Yeah, I couldn't hear you. You were
Go
like
ahead.
your video was like frozen or something.
Oh, okay. Well, it's probably my bad internet connection. I hope all this gets worked out online, guys. And I like my shows to be like this, messy. I'm not going to produce videos and make them super, what is the word called? Professional. I just
clean,
don't
yeah,
like that.
professional, yeah.
I don't like that. So, Dal, would you explain what theoretical orientation? Would you explain what theoretical orientation that you're coming at looking at the lens of theology?
Well, I guess I was raised to be Baptist, probably, honestly, like Baptist Christian, but I like kind of fell out of that at a young age and became an atheist very early on. And I was very um, very Matt. Like I watched Atheist Experience, love Matt Dillahunty. I like Sam Harris, and I was into like the Horsemen of the Apocalypse and all that for a long time. And then when I was 24, I read the Tao Te Ching and the other two accompanying texts. And by the time I got to the second one, I I don't know, I had some I got something from it, something out of it, and so now I'm in a, I don't know if it'd be a theistic state exactly, but I'm in some sort of position where I can see what both sides are saying, and I kind of empathize with both sides, and I have a sort of unified view between atheism and theism, which probably sounds silly to a lot of people, but that's where I'm at.
It is an actual thing. There is a thing called transtheism, and I think you probably closely align with that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I think I do.
So it's between. Yeah, that was really good, Dal. Thank you. Um, any Don Don or Casey doesn't matter.
Um, I I always, because of my Jewish background, I've always read the Torah or the Bible and like the theology of it all is more of a like rules to live a good and meaningful life. So when I look at like theology, I like to look at like the metaphors and the the artwork of it and what they're trying to teach and what it's trying to say. And I also look at it as a political document when I look at theology. And I kind of look at how all of these things, how are they justified? What do they mean? I take a very descriptive approach to like understanding what a religion is and what their theology is, as opposed to a normative one. What should the theology be? I don't really care
Right.
about that. So I'm very much interested. Like, what is the inner workings? How do they take that? Why did they take this specific verse and interpret it in this way as opposed to another way? What are the foundations of that? And a lot of times when I speak with religious people, they don't know the answer. I mean, most
That's
famously
because
was
every Christian in every church is going to give you a different answer.
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. And most famously on the Discord, it's been Josh. When I asked him what's a natural reading of the Bible, he couldn't give me one, even though he kept saying that's what he should be doing. I was like, what does it look like? Why do you choose to interpret thing A as A and thing B as B? And there's actual answers to this, right? You look at writings, you look at interpretations, you look at what they meant. You have like an originalism doctrine. There's all of that stuff. So a I like to still take that approach when I study the Bible and I study religion, but apply it in a much more scientific, secular way. So, like, I look at history, I look at modern theories about how the book was written, and I look at what they meant to write about, and that's kind of how I look at theology. That's how I try to study it.
That sounds like
That's
John.
really good.
Sorry.
Let's see. I'm going to go. Casey, can you hear me?
Yep, yep. Can you hear me?
Do you feel comfortable sharing your orientation to this and how you would approach thinking about theology?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's important. Hold on a second. Okay,
Take
so
time.
how we're defining God is kind of the interesting perspective for me. Um, I'm similar with Peter. I was raised Catholic and I've kind of been deconstructing for the last 10 years or so. And I don't know, the Christian God for sure. I'm just like, nah, there's some interesting things to take from it, and for sure, love your neighbor and all that's great. Um, but yeah, scientifically, do we believe that somebody is able to perform miracles? I'm on the fence, very skeptical of that.
Yeah, I lean towards the fact that a miracle would be very difficult to describe because, by definition, a miracle is super ultra rare, so we wouldn't know where it would occurred. Anyway, so let me read a little bit of this and then we'll talk about it. Just for the audience, theology is the study of religious belief from a religious perspective. More narrowly, it is the study of the nature of whatever the divine is. It's taught as an academic discipline, typically in universities and seminaries. It occupies itself with the unique content of analyzing the supernatural, but also deals with what's called religious epistemology, which there's different kinds. And it also asks and seeks to answer the question of what a revelation is. Also, things like soteriology, what one must do to be saved, would be another instance of considering theology. Now, theology is under theism. Um, or deism, either way. Well, deism's under theism, but theism is like the overarching belief, and theology is the study of that belief when you're looking at it through a different lens. Now, we have to remember that there's a lot of people in these schools, in this academic discipline specifically, who are atheists who study this in order to be the best that they can be against Christian apologists and things like that. Um, does Alex have is it a theology degree, or does he have a what degree in comparative religions, or what?
He has a degree in theology, Thomas. You're correct.
Okay, yeah. So he's going to understand this kind of stuff. Um, so revelation pertains to the acceptance of God, gods, or deities as not only transcendent or above the natural world, but also willing and able to interact with the natural world and to reveal themselves to humankind. So, any problems with any of that?
I missed half of that. I'm doing half picture stuff on the back end.
You're good.
Sorry.
Just repeat that, Tom. I don't think anyone was expecting.
The whole thing. I'm not.
Just the last couple of sentences.
So we're just talking about how it occupies
Yeah.
itself with the unique content of analyzing
Okay,
the
Corey, but just
supernatural.
the last couple of sentences. What you
The
you
last couple of sentences. Okay. Revelation pertains to the acceptance of God, gods, or deities as not only transcendent or above the natural world, but also willing and able to interact with the world and to reveal themselves to humankind.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So that's the basic gist of theology. Um, it blows my mind that you can have an epistemology on revelation, because revelation is a first person subjective experience, and epistemology mainly is empirical, at least today it is. So unless you were a crazy, like, super evangelical, maybe idealist, I'm not saying everybody's crazy. I mean, I just meant in terms of fringe, not crazy like me, bipolar crazy. But but
Okay.
I mean, the very idea of having a religious epistemology. Let's talk about that. What does everybody think about that?
Let's start with. I think this type of thing happened so many times in the past. Somebody would get an idea and put it forward. They couldn't get it forward. Just every now and then, somebody who got one of these ideas or thought they had some sort of a revelation was actually talented enough to convince a lot of people, and they were just smart enough to do it. They just had a way of speaking about it that just
Rhetoricians,
convinced
right? A
people.
lot of
Just
rhetoric.
somebody that was well trusted in a community prior to this to said revelation,
Yeah.
and it didn't take much back then with people's probably very poor critical thinking skills and littered with superstition of all sorts.
Re-
Well,
To
re-
be
I was
able
going to cover. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
just to be able to convey an idea that people went, wow, that probably fucking happened. And
Yeah.
it just starts off with a small bunch of people, and then they tell other people, and they convince each other that certain things happened, and that just grows. But if
Yeah.
it needs a seed, like it needs a powerful enough
so
person to project these ideas across. Otherwise, people are just gonna, yeah, you're full of shit.
I
Yeah. I
think
mean, there's been shysters and demagogues as long as civilization has been around.
Yeah,
Political hustlers, religious hustlers. There's been all those people
but
in
these
the
people
past.
probably believed it too.
well, I
Maybe
think
some of them.
even without the hucksterisms that can come about when you
Yeah,
don't have like a printing press or an internet or some like cultural superstructure to distribute ideas, you don't have like an underlying like ontology, like, because I think religious stuff is generally ontological, like you're using different categories than each other. Like a religious person is going to be talking about revelation instead of empiricism, because but almost in place of it, because revelation is like something that happens to them and it's an experience
yeah,
that feels true to them.
yeah.
And
Could have been mushrooms. Could have been fucking.
yeah, well, yeah, you can
Could have been.
have that with much. If you read Thomas Aquinas, like I was listening to an audiobook that was like a translation of Aquinas on the ontology of demons or something. He was saying that demons are psychological, but that the psychological realm is real. It's just that the shining light of reality is so bright that it outshines these demonic forces usually, and it's only when you're sleeping or when you're under the influence of alcohol or drugs like mushrooms or whatever that these demonic forces can then like make themselves appear as real, because you're like separate from the truth, you're more separated from the truth. And I think that makes a lot, like if you're coming from an ancient medieval theologian, I get what you're saying.
You're going to interpret these feelings and whatever mini visions or hallucinations as part of what you've been previously taught. I have a story about that as well. Well, carry on.
That's
Well, I
all
want to hear
right.
your story. I want to hear your story about it.
Sure,
No,
go ahead.
no, no,
No.
no. Okay, okay.
As long as
Let's.
it's not too long. We have a few more things to cover, but go ahead, Peter. Tell us what's up.
Okay. I was probably about 22, I'd say at the time. I decided to do an ecstasy tab and an LSD. I I had some pretty extraordinary experiences previous to that. Now, okay, what I was, in short, I was basically witnessing the birth of our solar system. I was like
I
positioned
mean,
in space, and this shit was happening. There was all these. There's all. It was just the birth of time. The beginning of. It felt like the beginning of time, and it evolved into me looking at my father, looking at his father, and back and back and back. And I could see this kind of this descendants mirror, or this kind of a thing going back in time, and it was ultimately connected to this fucking. I mean, the feeling at the time was incredible. And okay, let's just say by the time it was finished, it took me about 3 weeks to convince myself that I was not the fucking Messiah. I'm fucking serious. I can't really. Putting it into words doesn't actually justify it. It was just so unbelievably fucking profound, and it
I
was
I
so
just.
I I,
I've
I
had
do.
some pretty just real quick, Don Don. I've also had some pretty universal experience as well on acid. Go ahead, Don Don.
I was just gonna say that I don't think that it's good to kind of like blanket all religious experience into like drugs and mushrooms and like
Oh
psychosis,
no, of course. Yeah.
because there are a lot of like traditions of revelation. In Judaism, it's one of those things where it's not like some holy mystical beams of light literally enter your body. It's this idea that, as we've learned more, we have more revealed to us. We are interacting more with the text. We see how it applies throughout time. Look what they have this idea that the Bible is created for every generation. It's not just for the generation of the past; it's for every generation. So we learn something from it new. We look at it for wisdom into what's happening now, and then rabbis look at that, they write it down, and it becomes like the outcry of like the Jewish people, and that's like revelation. So Jews believe there's a continued revelation as well. It's not like one time, that's it. So with that's I think the theology, at least for Judaism and how they see revelation, is like a continuing thing through practice and study of the commandments and the Bible. And these
Right.
things are going to change as time moves on. And this is why there's like a saying called Shivim Panim LaTorah. There are 70 faces to the Torah, which means that there's
Do you
70
think
different ways
that
to
other
interpret it.
religions do that? Do you think that
Yeah.
other religions do that, where they continually upgrade themselves? I mean, maybe Catholicism, but what about like Protestantism in the United States?
Well, I think that there are some things that they do update and some things that they don't. Right? There's some things that are much more like instantiated in like the bedrock of the religion, where it's like necessary for them
Hmm.
to believe that. Like, I don't think Judaism is going to reform out of the idea that homosexuality is a sin, but they might reform in the way they did, where the state can't punish homosexuals because we don't have a Sanhedrin in a temple, so we can't enact God's will through the government. Right? They'll do that. That's kind of how they'll go around the loophole. So I think that is the way a lot of religions do that.
Yeah.
I do think Protestants can update their religion. They just tend to do it by starting a new sect of Christianity that's Protestant. They like deviate from their. They tend to fraction from their other church, like they did from Catholicism in the beginning, and now we have like a Protestant pluralogy. Pluralogy that's happening.
I don't know enough about that. Do you know more about it, Dal?
I don't know a whole lot of specifics these days, but I know that the like Catholic hegemony was down to like three groups for a long time. It was, I can't even remember the names of the groups, but there's like three groups. One was Eastern Orthodox. Catholic had kind of like two sides, and then there was Coptics too, but they weren't really involved. And when Martin Luther and there's more. There's other people, other names involved. Martin Luther and other guys basically decided that the Catholic tradition was corrupt somehow. It got corrupted at some point, and
They didn't like indulgences, and they didn't like taking money for like prayer and shit. You know what I mean? There were a lot of indulgences that you had to give the church back in the day at that time, and Luther was against that, and so he posted his. I mean, it's basically the beginning of Protestantism, but not. I mean, not quite. From as far as I can tell.
Yeah, even spiritualism. A lot of the non-Christian movements in the modern West can trace their roots back to uh, like the Protestant Reformation. If you just follow like the genealogy and stuff.
Well, I was going to say this later, but I can go ahead and cover on it. Most everything before the Renaissance and before all of that, uh, all of the universities and all of the medicine and everything was done by churches. They were the ones who instantiated these institutions because that's all there was. That was the only authority, probably with enough money to do these things and enough outreach in order to fund them. But, eventually that bit them in the ass because that led people to explore the truth and science. So, anyway.
Yeah.
There was also a big debate over voluntarism and non-voluntaristic understandings of God. So, like, I
Yes.
think one of the ideas is that God, as a non-voluntaristic God, he doesn't volunteer his will. You can't like say 5 Hail Marys, give penance, and then you'll be forgiven, right? That's
Yeah.
if for that God to exist, it would have to be a voluntary, a non-voluntaristic God. It's a God that does not volunteer his will. You can actually actualize God's will. And they saw that as pagan. They saw that as spell casting. A lot of those in the Protestant Reformation, where it's like, no, God is all powerful. We can't make him do anything. If you really want forgiveness, you have to actually believe it in your heart. And that was a big theological disagreement that these two camps had. One saw God as an object that has no voluntarism over his own will. Just you say the incantation and thus it happens. As opposed to the idea that God is actually all powerful and therefore what he says or they say is the end of the line. You cannot say a spell. You cannot give penance. There's nothing you can do. That was kind of like another
Yeah.
theological disagreement.
Was that the Protestantism or
Yeah.
look on it? Was it okay? And then
I bring this up again because I mentioned it earlier. That was like the 13th century, the 14th century idea of apophaticism. where God is unknowable and unquestionable, and that that should be taken as doctrine. Um, that was definitely a movement during the time of these Christian universities and things like that.
When was Henry VIII?
Um,
When it all started, really,
let's,
wasn't it?
I don't know. Let's look Henry VIII.
Part of it started there, and a lot of it. Some of it started in France and Europe as well, didn't it? Germany.
Yeah,
By
they've
the way,
all.
Thomas, if there's any links you want me to pop up, just shoot them my way.
Oh, you're good. I'm just looking up Henry VIII. Is pretty ass. Look at that sweet boy.
Is he?
Almost,
Is he?
almost,
Is he?
almost send this image to you.
Because
Oh my God.
he
No,
asked the
he's
Vatican, could he marry again? Could he divorce and marry again? And they refused him. So he basically just said, "Fuck that," and cut her head off.
dude. Look at this
Ouch.
guy, Don. Don.
Who? Who? Oh, you sent it to me over Discord.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. This guy is fine. Yeah, let's pop this on screen. 1 second.
I love how you can do that. I have no idea.
He had a portrait done,
Yeah,
obviously.
look at that boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that
Henry
guy.
VIII.
Oh, he's
Sexy.
fancy.
How many wives did he have?
Fancy.
He just fucking said, "Fuck
I mean,
this."
check out these guys' calves. Look at these calves. Absolute delicacies. Incredible calves.
That's the fanciest picture I've ever seen. I don't
Is
think
it?
there's anything
He'd
fancier.
6 wives, and how many did he kill?
Probably a few.
Who are the 7 wives of Henry VIII? Fucking hell!
Useless knowledge.
It's
Um,
incredible. Isn't it incredible?
Beheading. Beheaded. Okay. Was beheaded. Of his 6 wives,
Whoa.
Henry VIII had 2 killed, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. He accused Anne
Oh,
of
nice.
adultery. And she was convicted and beheaded on May 19th, 1536. And she had not given birth to a male heir, was, however, Henry's primary motive for having her executed. She couldn't have a boy. That's probably his fault.
How terrible.
Actually, I think that's
Very
isn't that the
terrible.
sperm thingy?
Okay, so let's get into some. What are different schools of theology, Thomas?
Yeah.
Do we have those? Do we know
So, I mean,
those?
it's not really schools. We can. Well, there's definitely schools.
There's different
Um,
religions.
so let's say let's explain this just a bit more for people in the audience. Theologians do use various forms of analysis and argument to help understand, explain, test, critique, and defend a myriad of religious topics. Religious apologists use theology, preachers, Catholic priests, they're all obsessed with this. Uh, so the study of theology may help a theologian more deeply understand their own religious tradition, another religious tradition, or it may enable them to explore the nature of divinity, whatever that is, without reference to any specific tradition. Theology may also be used to propagate reform or justify a religious tradition itself. Or it may be used to compare, challenge things like biblical criticism, or oppose a religious tradition or worldview, like irreligion, atheism, things like that. So these are theology might also help theologians address some present situation or need through a religious tradition. Just there's many different ways, but we can go down in religion. Of course, if we want to talk about like the divine, where that started, you have to go back to Greek philosophy. You have to go back to like Theologia, which is brought about by Plato in the Republic, um, and Aristotle divided it among like, see, what was his? I can't pronounce these Greek words, so I'm not even going to try. Um, drawing on Greek and story. So there was a bit. I'm not going to go through the Greek usage because theirs are very different than religious ones. They're more like philosophical pronouncements of the divine, or some metaphysical pronouncement of the divine, that they were just coming to conclusions on their own. But as far as like schools, like Don asked, I mean, there's obviously the Abrahamic religions. They're going to have their own defenses. We can talk about Judaism some more. We can talk about Buddhism, the Dharmic traditions, things like that. Um,
Okay.
So do theologies do the theologies ask metaphysical questions, or is that almost like an internal?
they're
Uh,
gonna try. They're gonna try to use scientific method and like things like that in order to prove their theories about the divine. But what was your specific question?
Metaphysics.
Are they
They're
going to use
using metaphysics.
metaphysics?
I,
Yeah,
I
probably.
I think my father studied theology, and he was saying that the certain ideas aren't allowed because they're blasphemous. So, I would suggest that anything that questions the validity or the fact that it doesn't exist in general is blasphemy. Therefore, probably being able to skip one, two, skip a few, 99, 100. So you start off with the premise that it does exist. You don't go
Well,
prior to that.
well, I think because if you get into more Eastern religions like Taoism or Jainism or even Brahma, if you're a certain type of Hindu, you find either non-theistic concept, like you can there are gods that don't exist, basically. Like in the Tao in Taoism is not said to be a thing that exists, like the 10,000 things. It's the mother of the 10,000 things, not that. And Brahman has a similar, in Hinduism, Brahman has a similar sort of capacity where it's not to be worshipped or revered. It's just like the thing that gives birth to all the other gods and all the other things. Um, so
so what do
yeah,
we
there.
call that?
Well, it has different names in different cultures. I think in Christian circles, I think there are version for like Christian theologians who have what's it, not Descartes. That's the wrong guy.
Augustine, Aquinas. Who
No.
else?
I have his name right here. Meister Eckhart. He was a
Meister
German.
Eckhart.
Yeah, he was a German Dominican mystic philosopher and theologian, and he believed in the ground of being. God is the ground of being. So God was beyond being. It was like the source of existence itself. And so I think he had a similar concept that might be transtheistic in the same way that
Is
I.
that like the same idea of like God is the unknown?
Yeah, yeah. At least I tend to attribute that. Like I know that's in the New Testament.
Is it more of a Neoplatonist thing where you think that God is the one being substance,
Um,
like the absolute one? Like
maybe. I
it's
mean, it
similar to
depends.
Buddhism, honestly.
It's
So
like I think apophaticism as a tradition within Neoplatonism kind of begs to the same, because it gives a kind of unapproachableness to the one. So I think you have to, as long as the thing isn't being described, or it's like it can't be said. If you can't say it exists, I think that's a way out of it. Just because there are like because an apophatic Neoplatonist wouldn't
it's
always
hard. It's hard to
say.
argue early Christianity without talking about Neoplatonism as well, and also
Well,
Gnostic Christianity. But go
well,
ahead,
we
Don.
have about 60 people in the chat. Maybe we should
Yeah.
talk about what those words mean. Apophatic, Neoplatonism. Maybe we can break that down a bit for people.
Okay, so apophaticism. Making sure I'm getting this right. So apophaticism means rejecting, limiting the knowledge of truth to. Okay, maybe is that it? This formulation is necessary. No, that's not it. Maybe I spelled it wrong.
On YouTube,
Apophatic
only.
theology.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe it's a bit different than what I thought. Apophatic theology is an attempt to describe God by what cannot be said of him. Oh, okay. No, that is similar to what I was saying.
Yeah, it was right. Yeah.
Describe God by what cannot be said of him. So, how do you interpret that, guys?
Well,
So
God is
so
the unknown. We don't know, so we define him as the one who's unknown, or the
yeah.
thing that
So
Right.
is not known. But it's defined
Yeah.
by the negative characteristics opposed to the
They're
positive
they're actually
characteristics.
saying can't be known, We can't
Yeah.
ever understand the mind of God. So,
Okay,
uh,
and Neoplatonism?
so Neoplatonism is a Hellenistic school of philosophy around the same time, and the Stoics and the Skeptics and all those popular Hellenistic schools, where it was moving into Roman and less into Greek philosophy. Um, what's the name again? Give me the name again. I just lost it.
Neoplatonism?
Neoplatonism. So Neoplatonism is very mystical, and it was one of the traditions that came out of like the understanding the realm of the forms and all of this.
Okay, okay,
And
okay.
they thought that there was this form of the one, the absolute, and returning to that in some way through this idea of a world soul and like very specific concepts, that they could return to this oneness, this one thing. And it is incorporated into Christianity because it was around a couple hundred years before Christianity. But Christianity also had this idea of this ultra being, God, and Neoplatonism had that idea of this ultra oneness, and
Yeah.
Zoroastrianism had the battle of good and evil. So all those early ones are very mixed together.
Yeah, I find Judaism to be a lot like that as well. Like there's this idea of like the one, the God as the
Yes,
one, and then that one is the thing you are a part of and have to return to at some point, and everything is about
yes,
this unity,
Yeah.
this being, this one unity being that we're all a part of and extensions of.
Yeah.
The idea
I
that God is
remember.
everywhere, everything. That.
My understanding is that and yeah, I think everything that everybody said is right, but I want to bring up the Dark Ages because my understanding is that Europe went through like a Dark Ages period where they lost the ancient Aristotelian and Platonic texts, and they were preserved by like Muslim cultures, and the ancient Muslim cultures adopted I think still to this day there are sects of Islam that are very Platonist and have very
Hmm.
Platonic influenced ideas.
Would that be like Sufi Islam?
Sufi Islam actually predates Platonism. It's kind of its own thing.
Ooh.
That's where you have
Wait, how does it? How does Sufism, Islam predate Platonism if Islam didn't exist until like the 600s or
seven,
whatever?
yeah,
So
700.
Sufism is like paganism. It's like the collection of beliefs that were around in the area before Islam kind of took over and homogenized everything, and then Sufism kind of continued and would spring up from time to time, and it even kind of got really popular occasionally. So you'd have
Hmm.
like there's ancient Sufi movements of scree. No, that's not the right word. I forgot the word. There's a word. There's a Sufi thing for dancing. It's like a dance movement where you can channel the divine through
Hmm.
Mhm.
ecstatic dancing, and that became really popular in the Islamic Middle Ages, which would have been um, after the Crusades and Europe got back those texts. But also, from what I hear, Kabbalah actually does share a lot of similarities with um, Neoplatonic texts. So it could, and all these religions were constantly in a dialogue because all the people that lived
Yeah,
were traveling and intermixing with each
yeah.
other.
I, I
So there are
yeah,
similar ideas in all the cultures and religions.
yeah. I
Peter,
remember.
you can respond.
I
Peter,
was
you can
going.
respond, but
I
I
was,
just
I
want to
was going
say, just real quick, I wanted to say hey to Dawson. Everybody say hey to
Oh,
Dawson.
Dawson, how you doing?
Everybody.
I was
All
just.
right, go ahead, Peter.
It was something that occurred to me just there. I remember reading. I don't know where I read it now. That the idea of individualism only really kind of sparked off around 2,000 years ago. The individual in as far as people were mostly tribal, but people going off on their own and thinking for themselves is a recent thing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as maybe, but probably happened over a greater period of time, 1,000 or 2,000 years.
Hmm.
But before that, we were much more tribal. We didn't think for ourselves. We thought with the group.
Yeah, it was easier
And
to survive that way. I mean, that's just how it is.
exactly.
I think
No,
it would.
go
Yeah.
on.
Wait, yeah, let Don go. Go ahead.
Go for it.
I think that don't let's not forget that we're still thinking with the group. To say that we think more for ourselves today than we thought for ourselves 150 years ago, I think for me just divorces the human experience. Like it somehow puts us above these other humans. I think they very much thought to themselves. I think they got into arguments with other people in their tribe. I will tell you, they believed that they were thinking for themselves. They had their rebels and they had their conformists. And when they were going through puberty, when they were going through their identity crisis, I'm for sure we know when we look at historical records, they were trying to assert who themselves and they were trying not to be like their parents. This has been true for a very long time. And I
Yeah,
think that
yeah, okay,
you
okay.
are thinking with the group. And if anything, today, being so connected to social media, you might be thinking with the group even more.
But what has there been? Was there ever a point of acceleration in that point?
Of
I
thinking
don't
for
know.
yourself, I don't even know how to measure that.
I don't know
Well, I
about
mean,
thinking for yourself, but I think
what
there
about?
is a
I'm sorry, just
sort of.
real
Go
quick.
ahead.
What about the wild? I'm sorry, Dal. What about the Wild West, Peter,
The Wild
where there
West.
were no tribes, or it was just people living out on their own?
You still had the McCreadys and the Hatfields and the McCoys. You still
Are
had
you talking
clans.
about
Clans were
the
still.
USA? Like,
I think there is this very recent modern phenomenon where you like kick your kids out of the house at 18. I think that's really new. I don't think any culture was throwing kids out of the tribe at a certain age to fend for themselves like you see culturally in areas today.
within the last 100 years, I'd say yes.
Yeah.
Let's
That
ask Dawson. Come.
All right,
Let's
so
let
I
Dawson get the word in.
I jumped in a little late, making sure everybody can hear me right.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
good.
Okay,
you're good.
cool. So this is all in relation to what is theology, and then
What
we're
is
thinking,
theology? Yep.
and then we're thinking about kind of the human and tribal relationships to theology right now. That's kind of
Yeah,
what's
that's where we
happening.
veered off. Peter took us there, but I mean, mainly we're just talking about like I'm reading from a couple of places, but mainly Wikipedia, and we're just going
Mm,
over what theology is for the audience and what its uses are and how it began. You know, how it began as like institutions and academies and
yep.
everything that were built from the church because there wasn't a scientific community. Every university was from the church. All medicine
Yep.
was from
Yep.
the church. So yeah, we've just kind of been talking in and out about that. What you think?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think for me, my kind of understanding of what is theology would be it would be basically theology is uh it's kind of like the philosophical study of the kind of philosophical object that is God, kind of within a context that okay, actually humans do practice religion. So like there's a part of the theology that's connected to the world very groundedly. And there's a part of theology that's more connected to Platonic ideals, connected to, uh, you know,
Supernatural.
yeah, the supernatural, connected to, yeah, all sorts of more heady things that are less physical, less connected to the real world. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my
Yeah.
conception of theology, and I
Yeah.
think my conception would be theology is more in the philosophical space, whereas you could think of something like religious studies as being more in the grounded space, though there's
Yeah.
obviously got to be some overlap.
Exactly. So the difference is theology incorporates the philosophy of religion, but when you're studying doctrine, you're basically just studying that religion. You know what I mean?
Mm,
You're not
yep.
necessarily studying. So theology, as we explained earlier, and to the audience, just remember, is the way that religious beliefs are seen from the point of those religious beliefs. So they're
Yeah.
trying to use philosophy. They're trying to use whatever empirically they can, whatever rational arguments,
Yeah,
whatever they can to defend the idea that there must be some theism at the bottom of it.
Yep.
So,
to, yeah.
yeah.
It goes from the premises that it's true, and
Mm,
this is how we're going to prove it.
yep. And then kind of taking all the outworkings, you plug in the variable of God does exist in the exposition, and then here are some verses in the Bible that tell us here is some fundamental nature of God in X or Y category, and you plug that into the equation, and then you try and do a little philosophical math and see what pops out at the other end. See if you get something new and useful. So I think
That's
that's what I.
Theology is a lot of, it's basically like um, philosophy with the bedrock of a religion, of a
Yeah.
religious text, as that which is
Yep.
making you believe it, um, or what you believe the nature of reality to be,
It
and then you
also
reason from it and whatever.
it also seeks to define the divine.
Yep.
Hmm. What is a divine?
So
I
yeah,
like to say
let's ask that question real quick. What is the divine? I'm sure Dal has a thought on
Mm.
this.
What's the divine? Interesting.
all right.
What
I
is
have
the
to.
divine?
How would I define it? I tend to think. I tend to define the divine in the same way I define God, which is just that transcendent thing. I think the divine can be seen as a place, or it's just like a type of thing. So you might be it's almost a different tool for talking about God, but essentially, when I think of people talking about the divine space or the divine realm, I think they're appealing to some like higher space of truth. So something beyond our our world of experience, something beyond what we're experiencing. There's some uh, uh, something that we can't interact with in our day-to-day experience that is truly going on beneath the surface of reality. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the divine, and so like the
Interesting.
glimpses into that world, that's like divine revelation is when when that thing that truth we're trying to capture comes into our lives and slaps us across the face and teaches us a goddamn lesson. That's divinity.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
I actually think of divinity entirely differently from the way that I grew up and learned about it. So I learned, most of my religious learning was in Hebrew. So the word in Hebrew is kadesh, which is almost like to put a dot or something, or an emphasis on something. Interestingly, in Arabic, when they say takbir, like to make something holy, in Hebrew it just means to increase, right? So there's this idea of like to make something important, like stand out, and to increase its height is to
Mm.
literally make it holy, the language that is used. And I think that what, at least I've always thought of holy, is something that we as people put a lot of emphasis on, a lot of importance, to the point where it like we treat it as if it's alive, as if it has moral value to that of a human, and that's when it becomes divine. That's when it becomes kadosh. That's when it becomes holy. It becomes,
A moral system outside of the realm of human thought.
yeah, like for example, the Torah. You can't drop the Torah. You can't put other books on top of it. There's almost a normative moral code about how you treat an object, and that's what makes it holy to me. It's us treating
Mm.
that thing as if it's something else than it is, and if it's more important, as if it's whatever it might be.
Okay. So the elevation of an idea or a thing or an object, and also its emphatic nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is Casey still with us?
No, Casey ended up leaving us. We
Okay.
got Dawson instead.
We got Dawson.
Sorry about that. It's
Um,
a
Oh,
unfortunate
Casey's still here.
substitution.
no, you're not. You're fine. You're good. Um, so let's read a little bit more to spark us here. So let's just talk about Christianity for a second, because I mean we
Mm.
could go into Islam and all this ridiculousness. So I could ask ChatGPT how Christian theology is mixed with Neoplatonism, but I'll do that in a second. As defined by Thomas Aquinas, theology is constituted by a triple aspect: that what is taught by God, teaches of God, and leads to God. There's a Latin saying, but I can't say it. This indicates the three distinct areas of God as the theophanic revelation, the systematic study of the nature of the divine, and more generally, of religious belief and the spiritual path. So, what do you think about that? That's some
I think
Aquinas had come up with a lot of these very interesting arguments, based on the education that he got in theology.
yeah, Aquinas is kind of my boy. Kind of like him.
Yeah, what
Well,
do you like about him?
yeah. What do you like about him?
I like he's well thought out. He's coming from a totally different world, and he's explaining it in a way that I can kind of get. at least when I listen to translations of his texts. And so but it's more mind blowing. I'm continuously like blown away at the perspective he's coming from, because he's like I think I already said earlier, like he's coming from the perspective that dreams are real. They're just in the background and being outshined by like the truth, by reality, and it's only when you're like unconscious or unaware or drunk or whatever that a dream or an illusion can pop up and like become the truth. It can become true to you because it's the thing in front of you. I don't know, just
Interesting.
really interesting.
Well, I want to talk about something that Spiritual Anarchist just said. I think they wrote, "Why isn't Christian theology ridiculousness? Ridiculousness? Why just other religions? What about the outsider's test for faith?"
Well, how can we know Revelation, first off?
Why
Right.
isn't Christian theology ridiculousness? I mean, I think a lot of theology, I think it's because every theological school is going to call every other theological school ridiculous. And I have
Mhm.
my own theological camp, so I'm going to call a lot of other theologies ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you consider Scientology ridiculous?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't even think that it's saying anything useful, as far as I can tell. It seems to be
No.
entirely a grift. I bought. I don't have it. I went looking for my Book of Mormon just for this. I've been reading through the Book of Mormon. I have the Tao Te Ching. I have 2 Bibles with me. You can't see them because my thing is blocked.
Yeah.
There we go.
But I've read a lot. Cannot get a lick of truth out of the Book of Mormon. Cannot figure out anything useful.
Mm.
Maybe
Well,
it's me.
The Angel Moroni, Dal.
Yeah.
I would say that it's not ridiculousness because let's be specific. When we say something is ridiculous, we're saying it has no coherence. It makes no sense.
Mhm.
It's absurd in many
Yep.
ways. Theology is not absurd. If you take the time to study it and to look at it, it's complicated. It has its own internal logic and its own internal coherence. It really isn't that ridiculous. Like Scientology is a little bit ridiculous. There really is. Is there a theology to Scientology? I don't know. But if there was one, I'm sure it'll also not just be absurd and ridiculous.
The big thing about theology that's the problem is that they're using forms of religious epistemology like revelational epistemology and things like that. Presuppositionalists use that anyway. And that's not epistemology. That is arguing for the divine, which is very fuzzy, arguing for spirit, which is very fuzzy. So
See,
that's
I
the problem.
think because because spirit and the divine are generally in an ontological place, as far like they're usually in this spot that just I don't even know how to say it honestly. It comes from a place that it is a metaphysical claim in and of itself. So I think that there's like the epistemology would come around, like it comes after that ontological claim, and so that's why you don't really have people talking about the epistemology of believing God, because usually the claim, especially in Christian traditions, is that God is the thing that like gives root to the ability to make justifications at all. And in the same way, like we discuss in physicalism, in our discussions on physicalism, it's like, how do we justify saying everything is physical when we don't know what everything is? And it's like, well, we can't really justify.
And the fact that our empirical senses, which we derive the physical from, is a part of our phenomenological experience. So that's another problem. But we won't get into that.
So real
yeah,
quick,
go
Thomas,
ahead,
Be
go ahead.
Skeptical just says, "Who cares about Christian anything?"
Mhm.
Honestly, okay. So one good thing, there is no greater love in this world than the man who gives his life for his friends.
That's nice. I
That's
like that.
That is nice.
Million.
I would say that who cares about Christian? Let's just be honest. I'm an atheist. I'm a
an
not
atheist as
I'm a
well.
Gnostic atheist. I take that hard line because I know that there is no God, especially one of the Abrahamic scriptures. Like I have a positive argument for that, but we cannot forget that within our culture, within the United States, within Europe, within a majority, this is by far one of the most influential library of books ever collected. Period. It's just one of the most
Substantive.
it is one of the most it is the most influential in our society. Everyone knows it, everyone knows its stories, everyone talks about it. The presidents swear on it. That's why it
Hmm.
matters.
Trump
This
Yep.
is why
told on.
Christian anything matters, because people, it matters to fucking people. They live their lives because of the way it is. So yes, skeptical, it fucking matters. And I
I
don't
think that
believe in it, but it does
I
matter.
think it
I
also
mean,
matters in a
Christian evangel.
theological sense.
Go ahead,
Uh,
Dales.
I think that because Judaism, Christianity,
Islam.
have been around for well, I'm thinking Judaic to Christian sort of philosophical tradition because you go sort of Jewish to Islamic philosophical tradition as well. But I'm thinking just kind of Jewish to Christian.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
There is many thousands of years tradition that is thoughtful that has been added to by just hundreds and thousands of people over the ages, from direct authorship into the Bible to commentaries around the Bible, both around the time of like its writing, afterwards, up through the Middle Ages, up until Reformation. You get uh, all through Enlightenment up to today. There are still people spending their lives trying to be extremely thoughtful about all things within that tradition. And I think there because so many people of really high caliber, of really like real intellectual capacity have put their time into this. They're interesting ideas all in Christian philosophy. That doesn't mean that I agree that the foundation is a good foundation to base a whole bunch of philosophy on. I think that taking God as as a given, as an axiom, I think that sets you off on the wrong path, but you can still gain a lot from just playing very complicated philosophical games, even if I think they're not referencing something that is ultimately true. There's just a lot of interesting stuff going on in the whole
Yeah.
tradition.
Yeah. Sure.
I
I
think a
mean,
lot of it has to be updated, though. Who does?
100%.
Nobody's allowed to touch the Bible anymore. It seems to be when this stopped, it stopped.
Mm,
You can't add anything to it. Like,
yep.
I
I
mean,
mean, this is what a lot of atheists say, but I could write a better Bible than the Bible by just changing the slavery verses
Hmm.
and the
Yep.
Yeah,
homophobic verses,
and the homophobia verses.
and the
I
gender
recommend
verses, and the
remembering that the King James is not the only Bible. The King James has been unchanged for a very long time, but there's not only the 3 to 5 other old texts that have been kind of updated.
well,
There's plenty of new Bibles that nobody uses.
the original Bible, I
Mm.
suppose that the Romans got together. It was then updated with a virgin birth in it, and then that was
A lot
inserted.
of the ecumenical councils, like the Council of Trent, the Council of Nicaea, there were a lot of arguments as to what could, how the Trinity was viewed, what books were going to go, were seen as too ridiculous to be in the Bible. Like, they almost didn't put Revelation in the Bible, which is hilarious. But yeah, Daniel and Revelations read crazy. Those are, I've
Revelation
read
was my favorite book as a Christian. It was like the most predictive of everything that was going to happen. I was like,
Yeah,
I feel prepared for the future.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
good to go for the
And the
apocalypse.
predictions in Daniel are so vague. They're so like, that Nebuchadnezzar had this dream and that Daniel goes to interpret the dream, but it's an interpretation of a dream of a I don't even understand. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around that. And then somehow the prophecies in Hosea and Daniel have to tie in with the New Testament. I don't know. Everybody who was writing the New Testament had access to the older text, I would imagine. So,
Of course,
making a prophecy wouldn't be.
get Paul in a cave doing mushrooms at the Book of Revelation. Well, it is a theory that he was
Well, John the
doing something.
something, John the something was proposed to have written Revelations in like 240
Yeah.
AD, somewhere on an island in the
John, was it
Mediterranean.
Saint Paul?
No, Revelation was written quite a while after
Yeah,
Jesus' death
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
by
you're right.
like a monk who had
Well,
a
it's talking
bad
about
dream.
Saint Paul in a cave, and he
A
was
lot of
he
a lot of it was written like a lot after that man died.
talks
Yeah,
about Armageddon, place in Turkey,
yeah,
where the great
seven-headed
battle would happen.
snake or dragon. I mean,
Don
seven-headed.
Don,
Yeah.
Yeah,
was
he was
Jesus a real
terrifying.
person?
Was Jesus a real person? Most certainly so.
You
Um,
think so? Yeah.
do I, yeah, I mean, there's enough people talk about it. I mean, what does it matter if he was real or not? I couldn't give a shit. Like,
I say I
Yeah,
don't care.
that's fine.
Oh no, that wasn't the question.
yeah, that was the question. Was Jesus a real person?
Yeah, was he
Most
a real
likely,
person or not? And
most
I kind of agree. I mean, yes, to Bart Ehrman and most of these textual criticists, that besides like Robert Price and Richard Carrier, um, the most main scholarship assumes that just based on the like Pontius Pilate existing and that interpolated Josephus passage where it breaks the fucking narrative to add Jesus's name in there. It's really weird, but I still give mythicism a thought, but I'm fine with the idea of Jesus existing. But did he walk on water? Did he change water to wine?
none of that happened. None of that happened.
What about the
The main
theory?
thing is, I just don't want to argue with Christians about whether Jesus existed or not. So I'll just tell them, yeah, sure. Still doesn't prove to me that Sky Daddy gave Moses rocks in the mountain. Like I couldn't give a fuck. So like, sure, I don't care. I just
Even
don't
What
if
care.
about
he,
there's a theory that Jesus, he did, kind of disappeared in his early teens and reappeared in his late 20s or whatever. That he went off and studied as a Buddhist.
yeah, there's a lot of theories. He's
There,
like
there,
there's
like
like
there,
a
India?
there is that
Japan
one because
theory.
a lot of this, like what he was talking about, love and
Yeah,
stuff like that, and that love shit, and it does mirror it somewhat because I mean, I suppose.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Dal.
Like,
I
okay,
mean,
go.
well, I think there's some truth to what you're saying, Peter. I don't know if it's exactly true, but I've heard people theorize about Jesus going to India during that time period and coming back, or going.
That would make
There's even a
sense.
town in Japan that claims Jesus went there, and that they have like artifacts from Jesus. Yeah, there's a
Probably
real
not.
place.
Yeah, that dude walked across the Himalayas, and then he flapped his bird wings and flew to Japan.
No,
Monkey magic.
he walked across the water all the way.
I
That's
doubt it, but
Monkey
I'd
magic.
also say that even
we got to
if
give him another superpower. He already went
Okay,
across the
okay.
Himalayas, right?
Fair enough. Fair
this,
enough.
this was an
Superpower.
argument that I was actually making today in the Discord. Even if Jesus did
Real
turn
quick, for
water,
those who are watching, we have a Discord where we talk about all of these topics. It should be in the description. I think is it Thomas? I'm not sure.
In
Uh,
my YouTube, yes, the Discord link is at the top part of. It's also if you go to Pangburn Philosophy or just Pangburn on YouTube, the Discord link is in big blue letters in the top right side of the screen.
yeah, and then you can come and talk with cool people like us, and maybe even show up to a live stream because these are usually open to people who are cool, well behaved, and have good opinions. But if you're not well behaved or cool, you won't show up. It's elitist thinking. But
We also talk about science and psychology
yeah.
and
We do. The
all.
Oh yeah, leave a
psychology.
like and subscribe too.
Yes, please do. The psychology is going to get a lot more rigorous here in the next few months, but we're still going to cover a few things in science because I had a little series going on. I decided not to go over every natural science because that would take fucking forever. But I do still want to talk about why physics is important, how we get to psychology, and how neuroscience and psychology work together, hard and soft sciences to give us indications of people's behaviors and their ideologies, and how they formulate their ideologies and how they do their behaviors. Don, did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, soft sciences are still sciences. It's in the word.
I agree.
hell yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Back to miracles. Even if
Yeah, back to miracles. Go ahead.
even if Jesus did turn water into wine and brought people back to life and cured blindness, he wasn't the only guy going around that time period curing diseases and changing the weather and resurrecting people. There were all sorts of people going around. We have documented cases of the same time period of people like curing diseases, changing the weather, summoning God. There's one guy, the Oni the circle maker, who would go out and he'd draw a circle and he'd stand in it, and he'd say, "I'm not moving until you make it rain, God. Make it rain right now, right? I'm telling you, you have to do what I say right now." And then it would start raining, and everyone was mad at him because he was telling God what to do, and God would listen. But they weren't saying he was wrong. They were saying that he was mad,
Well, a
and
little
that God
disrespectful.
listening to him
You
was a
also had.
bad thing. They weren't saying
Mm,
God wasn't listening. They were saying that was crazy and shouldn't be happening.
It was a little
Well,
demanding.
that reminds us. That reminds me of the thing we are just talking about: the voluntaristic versus non-voluntaristic accounts for God's will. So it seems like, in that perspective, from a theological perspective, they were very upset that it's almost his actions, the only circle maker's actions, are forcing God to not have will control over his own will, and therefore it's a bad thing. Maybe.
So Dawson, go ahead.
Oh, I was just making fun. I don't have any other particular thought. Let's see. I could probably come up with one though. I do love the idea of a guy who just draws a circle, gets the rain to start. I'm sure it was a very popular thing to be doing in the Middle East many years before you had all the farming equipment, irrigation, canal. They had some irrigation,
deserts,
but not nearly as
deserts were
much.
shit. Like, yeah.
So it's a good niche to go into as a prophet, rain prophet. But yeah, on the question of, I guess the question was originally Jesus's historicity. I think it makes sense that Jesus existed. There are a fair number of fairly close by attestations of his existence, and all the experts that I listen to are generally cool with just going, "We're pretty sure Jesus existed." So
Most of the
then,
scholarly world is going to agree with you.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are just
So then
because there's no
because it,
reason to doubt
there's
that he did.
yeah, and
five.
because it's important to Christians, then I am very happy to grant that because I think most of the time in most conversations, if you're in at least 95% agreement with someone, you just agree. You don't need to pick at something that you're like, actually, I got about a 10% that I think Jesus did not exist. It's like, let's grant that and keep going with the conversation.
I
That'd
take
be
the I
my
take the
view.
arguments of Richard Carrier, and not to interrupt you, sorry.
Mm,
The I take the arguments of Richard Carrier and Robert Price seriously. I mean, I'm not convinced that mythicism is real or that a bunch of different itinerant rabbis got to conglomerate it into one mythologically. Um,
mm,
but I'm willing to accept that Jesus existed. I'm just not willing
yeah,
to accept any of the extra stuff.
yeah.
We also have to be aware that there was a lot. There was the way magicians are, able to do sleight of hand. There was conjurers there then as well. There's people that could fake magic.
Oh yeah.
That is actually true because
Mhm.
English people used to go do that to tribes in order to take their resources and
Yep.
colonize.
Yep.
They would show them like box tricks and all this stuff that like Penn and Teller do today, and it would
Yep.
just make them think that they were having a religious experience.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, that is one thing that has happened.
I
yeah.
believe I believe
In
Christopher
India, it was a
Columbus
popular thing as well.
arrived on some island. The local inhabitants, were not helpful in the sense that they didn't give him and his crew all of their food or something like that he had asked for. And because he knew there was a solar eclipse coming up in a week, he was like, "All right, if you don't give me food, I'm going to make the sun go away in a week." And then lo and behold, because he knew that
Who
there's a
who knew
solar eclipse, this is Christopher Columbus. And lo and behold, a week later, the sun went away for a few minutes. So then got
But
all the
how did he? You serious that he was able to predict this?
This was something that like he would have known before going off on his like expedition on his journey from
I'd
just
have to check it out and see, was he that clued into the.
Well, I mean, you may be right, Dawson, but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know on that one.
I've also heard
I'll
that
pull it up,
story.
confirm that I'm not spouting nonsense
No,
No,
here.
no,
you're
what,
fine.
I'm not saying
This
you.
is basically
No,
group study time, so we're all
Hmm.
fine to take our time and do that.
I do know that we've been able to predict eclipses for a while.
Well, that was 1492. So was that before or after Galileo?
Yeah, so it was a total lunar eclipse of March 1504 in which Columbus induced the inhabitants of Jamaica to continue provisioning him and his hungry men. So
Ah,
there we go.
ah, ah. There you go,
Uh,
Peter.
the
Why,
earliest,
why not just kill them all and take their food?
I think they kind of
It's-
did that later on
yeah,
in the story,
yeah,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Talk about
Yeah, yeah.
Cortez and all of his murder sprees.
Get with the
Uh,
times, man.
get with the times. If you ain't murdering, you're not cool.
Yeah.
That's right. Um, so we guys in the audience, just to know, I'm loving this, and I hope you guys are enjoying it too. This is how we work through the dialectic. I kind of always want to bring that up in my shows. You know, learning from each other, trying to understand each other's point of view, but also gaining new knowledge in the process. Knowledge is a bit normative, but at the same time, there's also a very descriptive nature to learning things, to learning new
Hmm.
scientific criteria and theories and all this stuff. So that's why this is so important, and that's why I like doing it in this fashion instead of some produced video that's just me talking to the camera. I don't like that. But
Thomas, have
yeah,
you
go
got
ahead.
anything on Eastern philosophy or
Say again.
Eastern theology? Eastern theology on this?
Eastern theology. Let's go look. Let us
hell
go
yeah,
look. So
Different ideas of God over
uh,
there. So
Buddhism. Some academic inquiries within Buddhism, dedicated to the investigation of Buddhist understanding of the world, prefer the designation Buddhist philosophy to the term Buddhist theology, since Buddhism lacks the same conception of a theos or a theistic God. That's one thing about Buddhism. Hinduism, within Hindu philosophy, there is a tradition of philosophical speculation on the nature of the universe, of God, or Brahman. Can you pronounce those other two? Paramamatra and Bhagavan. Is that it, Thou?
I can't
Or
Paramatra.
say
the
it.
Indian gods?
You're close, probably as close as I'd get.
Shiva, Ganesh.
Yeah, I can't pronounce them very well. But Atman was the soul.
Yeah,
So, yeah, Atman. The Sanskrit word for the various schools of Hindu philosophy is Darshana. So they did have a theology. It's called Vaishnava theology has been the subject of study for
Hmm.
many devotees, philosophers, and scholars in India for centuries. A large part of its study lies in classifying and organizing the manifestations of thousands of gods and their aspects. In recent decades, though, the study of Hinduism has also been taken up by a number of academic institutions in Europe, such as Oxford, and I can't pronounce the name of that college. Holy hell.
I,
That's
I
long.
would say that'll be a very interesting one to explore.
I mean, does Taoism have a theology? I mean, does
yeah,
Sikhism have a theology? I mean, I don't know. I
yeah,
don't know
they
the
do.
answer to that
Uh,
question.
uh, I don't know enough about Sikhism
Yeah,
to. I know that they have
Of course, yeah, they have a
trans-theistic.
theology.
Yeah, I know that they're
But
trans-theistic. That's what I know about Jainism.
Hindus believe in the doctrines of samsara, the
yep,
continuous cycle of life, death, and reincarnation, and karma, the universal law of cause and effect. One of
Yeah,
the key thoughts of Hinduism is Atman, or the belief in soul.
yep,
Its philosophy holds that living creatures have a soul and they're all part of the supreme soul.
yeah.
yes.
I
Uh,
also want to
Which
say that.
wait a minute. Which sect of Buddhism was that?
that's Hinduism.
Hinduism. Okay,
Hinduism.
Yeah, yeah.
Hinduism. Gotcha.
I want to say that most of these traditions are so vast and complex that a lot of just about anything you say about them, there's going to be a specific tradition within them that doesn't do that thing. So,
yeah,
like we
That's
that's
said,
true.
it well
yeah,
predates Christianity.
yeah.
Anyway,
Like earlier, we said Buddhism is a non-theistic religion. There are theistic strands of Buddhism. Like I think there's Theravada, but I also know there's Pure Lands Buddhism, which I know more about. That has bodhisattvas, which kind of take the same deistic
Yeah, I've heard
position.
that before.
it
Yeah,
goes back 4,000 years, Hinduism.
I
Yeah,
can't imagine any serious religion not having some form of their own theology. I mean, because
Is theology just the inner the closed system philosophy of the,
Yeah.
the religion.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah, it's
already
just
assuming
philosophy.
Yeah.
you're already assuming that religion is true. You're trying to understand, well, not necessarily, but you're trying to understand religious belief through religious belief, which is a problem already.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my understanding is philosophy used to be a Greek thing. That was what the Greeks did, was called philosophy, but it was called Judaism when people in Israel did it, and it was called something else when people over here did it. And then as history progressed, philosophy kind of grew into this greater, more encompassing thing. And theology was this thing that Christians were doing in the Middle Ages. They developed this thing called it's I wish I
Yeah.
could remember the name of it. I used to call myself it, but it's basically the idea is that you will take on the book that the other faith uses, and you will learn it so that you can use it to undermine their faith and convert them to Christianity. So it was theology was originally talking about other religions as a sort of weaponization. It was trying to convert people to Christianity,
Mm.
but since it became a study, it kind of became a universalization for talking about any religion, and so now it's kind of its own
Yeah,
universalized thing.
yeah.
Hmm.
What do you guys
That's
think?
interesting.
I do think that looking kind of across different theologies, it does give you some frame for what theology is for and what it's there to describe. So I was just looking at like Hindu philosophy, Hindu theology, and in Hinduism, very central to the philosophy is the idea of Brahman, and there is the god Brahma, that's very much related to that concept. And Brahman is basically the ultimate reality of the universe, and that concept is kind of the way that then everything else is interpreted out in the religion. And then like you can have more modern interpretations of something like Brahman. So for example, one AI researcher that I follow on Twitter, he often refers to his AI research work as basically touching Brahman or capturing some part of Brahman or working towards Brahman.
Hmm.
In that, as we're creating this new intellectual form, we are becoming closer to God. We are becoming more in contact with God. We're becoming more like God. And I think that basically, if you look at anyone's individual theology from the culture that they grew up in, they'll be able to make these very interesting connections that I think there's actually some philosophical ground that you can go and say, okay, that's an interesting idea. How are you connecting this ancient Vedic idea of Brahman to the very recent development of artificial intelligence? And I think you're going to have interesting ideas from a Christian perspective, interesting ideas from an Islamic perspective, Jewish perspective, and I think that they're all different ways of touching that which is divine, that which is most uh, the ultimate reality. I think that's one way to put it.
The
Yeah.
unknown. They're
Ultimate
trying to
reality.
understand what the unknown, that which is
Yeah.
inaccessible to our senses.
Yes.
I'm
Um,
newly appendage. I think God made us in the image of spiders.
Ah, let Don Don jump in real quick. He had a point coming.
yeah. So that idea is very much paralleled in Jewish thought, surprisingly. So if you look at
Mm,
the beginning of, everyone's heard the phrase abracadabra, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
So it literally translates to as I create as I speak. Evrakadabra just literally means I create as I speak.
Is that
Uh,
you? Is that a?
Aramaic.
Oh.
It's
It's
Aramaic. It
Aramaic.
means
Okay.
Aramaic. Avrakadabra means create as I speak. And that's why in the Old
Okay.
Testament, God speaks to create. So there's this really big emphasis in Jewish thought that to create is to be like God. God is an entity
Mm,
that creates, and therefore we create. And this is
yep.
why every Sabbath, Jews do not do transformative work. It's not that
Mm,
Jews can't work or cook or sweat. It's that you're not supposed to be like God. God rested on the seventh day, and so do we. That way we rest because we're a part of God. We also rest. We don't light fires. We don't cook. We don't rip branches. We don't plant. We don't do any of that stuff because we are also resting from creative work.
mm,
So that idea is parallel. It's like as I create AI, I'm doing a godly thing. As you create,
yeah.
you do a godly thing. And this also ties into John Locke's idea of property, that he believed that when you work the land, it essentially becomes an extension of you.
Mm,
It becomes a part of you, it becomes part of your metaphysical identity, and that's why you have
yeah.
a property right to that. So theology
Ooh,
has
that's
played
interesting.
a really interesting impact on the way we see everything in the world. So
A theological basis for property rights. I haven't ever, put those together, but that's kind of
mhm,
fun.
mhm.
I
If you
mean,
want to
yeah,
expand on that, Don Don, feel free.
I don't know what else to expand on. I mean, the
Yeah,
idea is that you work the land and it's somehow yours, and then people can't take it away from you.
because you're metaphysically attached to it.
A lot of
Yeah.
this
I
politics
mean,
was
Go ahead.
interjected like string. As you're saying, like there's a lot of politics in the Bible as well.
Oh, of course. I mean, Marxists use that same idea of property to say why they deserve to have right of the payment of where the product is. They worked
Mm,
for it. They worked for the product. Now you can't just say it's all you. No, I didn't get what was worth it. You stole my property. You stole
mm,
the thing that is in part mine. I worked on it. I created it. It's an extension of my will, just like we're an extension of God's will. This is how
yep.
that idea was developed. So
Exactly.
yeah, and
Tao.
it's always been religious. Like before we had property being an extension of ourself, we had the divine right of kings, where everything that you were given upon birth was yours, and everything the light touches. If we're getting all
Mufasa on it, yeah.
But
Mufasa is yours.
there has to be a point in that in which like we do respect human nature and we do need our own property. Like
Yeah, I'm totally for property. I'm just saying
I
that.
like
okay,
property.
it's fine. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying
I love
that
it.
it's this is like the theological things that we do as well in a small way that we take for granted. Um, so
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that it brings it up because it actually acknowledges the fact that without that, you know,
Pe-
that we need certain things. Okay.
Peter, I want to ask you: is music divine?
Ooh. Um, it definitely does something that might be interpretable as being divine.
Yeah.
You know,
How would that musical experience differ from someone else's revelational experience? Like
uh,
when you're really in the music. I mean,
so no, that kind of realization could probably be put into words in some degree. It could be, let's say, abused in a sense to exaggerate other things or to come up with something that's beyond the physical. If that makes
I
sense.
now I have like a transcendental feeling about music, and I know you do too. But does
Yeah.
that transcendentalness count as like mystical or not magical,
Okay.
but
I there's something happening in the universe. I think I wrote something down actually there
can
recently. No, I'm not. Of course, I'm not making any theological fucking claims.
yes, you
Um,
are, Peter. Don't lie.
no, no,
Peter.
because I don't. But here it was. If the universe is questioning itself, and we are the vessel through which it questions, it is our possible destiny to explore this vast cosmos. I was probably I woke up straight in the morning, but yeah, we
I
are.
like where that was going. I like where that was going. Read that. That was a
We,
good. Yeah, yeah. Read that again. Read that again. Read that again.
but we are the universe questioning itself. We are of the universe, and we are questioning itself. I think if there is a religion or if there is something to go by, then we are only in the absolute infancy of our ability to comprehend what is going on.
Agreed.
And
I
we're
agree.
just arrogant, we're so arrogant that we're willing to make these huge jumps to answer these massive questions.
Yeah.
We haven't even we're only beginning to get out of our fucking nappies or diapers, as you might call them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and we've been so fucking arrogant for so long. We have to know where we are,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
we are
Peter,
part of this.
Peter, the internet is still in diapers.
Yeah. I mean,
We're
this is
we're
this is
part of
this is
this
a,
process, and we should be proud of it.
Yeah.
this is something that I think rings true for any type of discipline. Um, you must know the constraints of your epistemology, the constraints of your metaphysics, the constraints of your research, the constraints of your own ability to be able to actually know it. And I think that a lot of people think that human knowledge is unlimited. Um, it's not. It's not. And when we take that into account, we're like a boxer who knows I can get knocked out. The way I do things is not going to be the best. I have weaknesses. I can't do this, this, and this. So I have to learn to build knowledge, knowing that I'm fallible, knowing that I cannot know things for absolute. And I think that's what changes. I think when people think of theology as opposed to philosophy, they think that theology doesn't do that. It's infallible because they have the the Bible as their groundwork.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do that as well in philosophy. People hold
Mm.
things for assumptions, and
Yep.
it's different. It's different, but theology is philosophy because I see
Hmm.
spiritual anarchists saying that in the chat that it's not philosophy. It's a form of it. It's like
Of
mathematics
of
is a
course
form
it
of
is.
philosophy.
I would say the
As you said,
philosophy is involved very deeply in what they're trying to do. A
no,
lot of it may be gymnastics and quietism. I don't know.
Hmm.
my,
I'm
my
assuming a lot of it probably is because most of the people going into this are going into seminary, and they're assuming the divine already exists. So they're arguing from those positions and
no,
things.
Yeah,
Go
but
ahead.
my father had he did a degree in theology when he was in his 60s, and he had a philosophy class, so he was studying philosophy, but it was limited. Any philosophy that may have be considered blasphemy, which was any philosophy that was undermining the faith, was not permitted. Same with logic, same with morality, everything.
Mm,
So that it was all contained within the Catholic ethos. That it was only stuff that was positive, or that would benefit the faith as opposed to deconstruct it,
hmm
which is
This is why science is dragging the religious world kicking and screaming forward.
I know my father knew there was something wrong with that, even though he was a staunch Catholic, but he
Mm.
still would have known that there was a
Yeah.
limit because
So
he even
let's.
said to me, you know, go on,
Oh
carry
no,
on.
you're fine, Peter. You're good,
Go, go,
brother.
go, go,
We,
go,
we
go.
don't mind we don't mind listening to you. I love listening to you. Let's go around the room. We've been on for about an hour and 30 minutes. I'm not tired.
Mm.
We're all going to go and hang out in Discord after this, most likely, play video games and be silly. But does anybody want to say any final remarks, or like, do we want to keep the convo going? It's up to you guys.
I'd jump in with one thing on music.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I'm not a musician, but I think that there is something divine in music in the same way there's something divine in kind of worship. I think that those things often go together in human culture, and they're a way that humans connect both with each other and with something greater than ourselves. And I think that there's some parts of music that they connect with our brain in ways that I don't understand,
Yeah.
but music is made of patterns, it's made of structure, it's made of self-reference and beats that are holding things together, and
But it
then there are
somehow turns
ways
out to be a universal language, right?
it does. and I think there's something universal to that does make music in and of itself special. It has special properties. And one thing that I need to read at some point is Gödel, Escher, Bach, because that kind of pulls in some of the ideas of math and intelligence and the brain and music and all of those patterns together. And I think that's something that's on my reading list.
As
So
far as content goes, and not the emotional aspect, music is nearly identical to the evolution of mathematics.
mm,
Yeah.
Yeah, the systemat. Damn, I can't
Yeah.
say that word. Systemization.
Systemization.
Systemization of music into music theory has allowed people to write something down, and then that other person can play it, verbatim as it's written down. So it
Well,
has
no, no,
become
no,
kind
not necessarily.
no,
The
not necessarily,
development of
not necessarily.
harmony and
Would you
rhythm.
say that that's Peter? Would you say that that's possible though? That you can write music down and have someone else who can read music play the same thing that you wrote down?
Yeah, yeah. But
Okay.
that's
So what
normal.
I mean by that is it has some descriptive nature. There's something there that we can
yep.
divide into
Yeah,
intervals of
yeah. There's
time.
certain rules and there's
We do
certain.
that. We do that with language as well, right? I
Yeah.
We
write
do.
down words, and you're gonna read them as I write them down. If I get
Yep.
super specific with accents, beats, all of that stuff, I can have you read this exactly as I wanted to write it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phonology.
You
Right.
can
Right.
do
Like
that, but I
Who said
think music
phrenology?
transcends
no,
No,
that.
not
phonology.
phrenology. Not phrenology.
Phonology.
Phonology is like
Phonology.
the
Yeah.
language of speech, where if you learn to read it, you can say anything in any language as long as it's written in it.
We
But you
we
won't know
talked
what
about
you're
this on my
saying.
linguistic shows about phonology and phonemes and how those little how those things communicate messages when combined together. It's very weird.
How
Yeah. So
come it's harder to play music than fucking speak? You'd think it's yeah.
I'll tell you how, because one of them is directly fucking plugged into our fucking brain, and the other one we gotta use our digits for. That's why it's easier to speak than it is to play music.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay. There's a few ways looking at this. Drop that next conversation.
Well,
This
guys,
is for a later date.
we're hitting 1:30. It's been an hour and 30 minutes at this point.
Yeah, we've been
So
having a good time. I really enjoyed it.
convert
so
to Taoism.
so everyone like and subscribe Thomas's channel because it's the best. And if you watch Thomas's show, I'm letting you know that in like 5 months' time, you will have to start downloading Encyclopedia. I have a show too. I advertise for Thomas because Thomas doesn't advertise for himself. Like, subscribe, and join us on Discord. We're probably going to be there for the after show. I think this is Dawson. This is your first time with us on a podcast, right?
It is. Yep.
Well,
Well,
get
it
used
was
to it being a
yeah.
regular occasion.
It's nice having you.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's
Happy to
open again
join.
to anyone who's chill,
Yeah,
knows how to have a good conversation, and knows how to disagree properly.
that's
So
right. Yeah. So everybody, thank you for coming. Subscribe to our channels. We love you very much. Always remember that love it's built into philosophy. Philosophy is the love of wisdom, and I think wisdom gives us love. So
You're
it's
great.
it's a two-part thing for me. It's a dichotomy or whatever, duality or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, we love you. Thank you for coming to my show and commenting and everything. And please subscribe. And we're heading off.